Welcome everyone, it's Atif the Cinema Guy, and I am very privileged to be interviewing Jim, who is owner of Lumagen. Jim, I can't introduce you with your accolades as well as you can yourself, so for the audience, please introduce yourself.
My name is Jim Peterson. I'm the owner, founder of Lumagen. Lumagen's about a 23, 22-year-old company. We've been making video processors for that entire period, and we've started with our Vision series. Then we went and in 2007 introduced our Radiant series. My background is in electronics mathematics. I have degrees in mathematics and electronics engineering. So I've been doing this for some time. I've been in the industry over 40 years. So I've been doing architecture for microprocessors and video processors and video chips, graphics chips, stuff like that. That has been my my background. So I started Lumagen when I needed a video processor and there wasn't a cost-effective one back in 2001, 2002. And what our goal has been is to make a cost-effective video processor. So we started out with video processors as low as $1,000 to $2,000, but over time, the chips got more expensive. We had to use much larger field programmable gate arrays. And so what we're doing now is, it's gone up in cost, but it's still the best value if you want quality. So at Lumagen, our goal is studio reference quality in the home for the home cinema. So we are focused entirely on video quality. We have a lot of industry people using our product because of the quality that we're able to provide that's better than anything else out there at a cost-effective, value-oriented type of video processor. So it's one of those niche markets, but it's a niche that people feel very, very happy. We have lots of our customers whose their complaint was, my only complaint is I didn't do this sooner. I should have bought the Lumagen. I didn't know how much it could do for my image quality and my experience. So my background was doing graphics chips back years ago and doing graphics and switching over to video. So designing, I'm kind of a math guy. So I think about, do the algorithms, do the low-level algorithms. We do our own algorithms, of course, standing on the shoulders of great engineers before us, but we do our own algorithms. I have a really excellent programmer who does our Verilog code for our FPGA, and I'll talk about that in a little bit too. But we use a field programmable gate array to make it retargetable algorithms, and so he does a lot of the more specific things like in dynamic tone mapping. One of the things that we do better than anyone else is I did the base algorithms, but he did all of the scene detection and all of the special casing, since there's lots and lots of special cases to deal with when you're trying to dynamically adjust and do what would be called a trim pass in real time. So that's what we do.
Incredible. Now that's what you call an introduction. So let's take it back to when you said you wanted to develop a video processor because, well, you weren't obviously satisfied with something. Can you explain to the audience what it was that you weren't satisfied with and how you developed this product?
Well, at the time, the product that was available was from Perugia, and it was $25,000, and that's like a very expensive price point. So I looked at what we could do with a field programmable gate array, and at the time another chip that we used that already had some of the video processing in it. And what we could do is we could come out with a product that was a lot more cost effective and, in our opinion, just as good. So we started out with a product that was $2,000, and we actually then introduced a smaller version of that was $1,000 at the time.
At that time, so if you imagine, back 20 years ago, when plasma TVs were available, and you had pretty good projectors from the likes of JVC and Barco. So someone investing in that piece of technology, and they set everything up, they get to watch their Blu-ray films. If they've invested that amount of money in their tech to enjoy the content. How did introducing a Lumagen video processor change what they were viewing? Surely you'd think, well, I've invested in an expensive projector, an expensive, top-of-the-range, latest tech LED display. What revolutionized things?
Well, not dissimilar to today. So back then, that day, it was DVDs were basically coming to become the main high-quality source watching TV, 4:3. So what the problem was is getting a television up in resolution to show it at HD. So in that day, it was 480, 576 were the resolutions for the sources, but the projectors were becoming capable of 720p and then 1080p. And so you had to convert. And the big complaint I heard from people was, when I watch on my HD projector, it looks worse than if I just watch it as SD because the scalers weren't very good. So we focused initially on scaling. And then we focus on all the features you might need for a projector. I had long ago, I had a 9500, LC 9500, which was a CRT projector. Excellent. You could run 1080p, but you needed to scale SD up to 1080. And so that was really the main focus. And then we started doing aspect ratio control. A lot of sources were 4:3, and people started doing 16:9 screens. That was the big, 16:9 was the aspect ratio back in the day. And so we could do scaling, we could do nonlinear scaling. That was one of our early features. 2004, we added nonlinear stretch for those people who wanted to stretch to fill their 16:9 screen. When 1080 TVs came out, they were 16:9. And so there was a lot of content that was still SD. It needed to be deinterlaced, it needed to be scaled and adapted for your screen size. So that was the main focus early on.
And obviously since then, now we have HDR and 4K content and having to sort of handle all sorts of video information. So how is that changing in the industry?
The HDR has been a big issue in the industry. So when they did HDR, they decided to go for this grand, idea of we could do 10,000 nits. Wouldn't that be great? The issue is projectors can't do. Typically, a projector, you're getting 100 nits. If you have a really, what we call a light cannon, you might have 200 or 300 nits, but not 10,000. Most content today is mastered at either 1,000 nits or 4,000 nits on a monitor that's capable of 1,000 or 4,000 nits. So today, the big issue with HDR is you don't have enough light to just reproduce it the way the director was watching it when he was grading the film. And so HDR has become a big issue for the cinema. People who have home cinemas, how do you watch it? You have to do a trim pass on the fly if you want it to look good. Dolby Vision was introduced to try to work on that. And what we've done is we can do it with any HDR source, HLG or HDR10. What we do is we do a on-the-fly trim pass to make the image look as best possible. One of the advantages is we can take any amount of light, any size of screen gain, all that, and you can then adjust your home environment to the optimal place given what you've decided, how much light your projector can do, how big a screen, what the gain is, that you adjust for, and then you basically sit back and watch. Our goal is for people to sit back, enjoy with a studio reference quality image.
That brings us on to the fact that as technology advances, prices do come down and you can get incredible value. Pro UHD projectors and even Sony's native 4K projector and now laser technology. And one of the things that I think you've mentioned to a lot of customers is that by adding a Lumagen, rather than spending a fortune on a projector and still not getting the best out of it, by adding a Lumagen process into the system, you can get far superior results by getting sort of less expensive projectors.
Yes, and that's actually a value that we have, is you can buy a less expensive projector and a Lumagen, and for less cost, for the same cost, you get a better environment at home, better cinema quality. And we have people who will step down one product in a line of projectors from JVC or from Sony, add the Lumagen, and they've met their budget. So in fact, one of my comments to people is, buy the Lumagen first and then use the rest of your budget for the projector. And you'll have a better result, because we're going to do all the heavy lifting. For HDR, we'll do automatic aspect ratio control. We have now an instant aspect ratio feature. We've had auto aspect since 2014, but we recently, last year, we improved it so it can be instant if you want. I try to educate people that you don't want to change in the middle stream of a movie like Top Gun Maverick on an anamorphic screen. You don't want this 1.9 sections to be smaller. That's really almost silly to do that, but we can do it if you want to. So basically, it's you get to choose how you're going to watch content. If you want to see that 1.9 smaller on your 2.40 screen, you can do it. But we also give you the opportunity to watch it full screen. We do start of the movie. You don't have to figure out what aspect ratio the movie or the show is. We automatically detect that. And that's one of the advantages we have, and over just having your own just the projector, because it increases your enjoyment. You just sit down, you hit play, and you watch your movie. You don't have to adjust things every time. You don't have to manually refocus the screen or the projector after you change the aspect ratio. So we do all that to make a better home cinema experience.
I think, yes, you're just talking about that particular film, you're absolutely right. If you've got a scope screen like I have, for instance, watching any Christopher Nolan film or Maverick, unless you've got that instantaneous aspect ratio change, it does ruin your enjoyment of the film. So having that feature is incredible.
Well, good. Yeah. So I try to talk people out of using it for the Nolan films and Top Gun Maverick, because if you have an anamorphic screen, you actually have a more immersive view if you just leave it in anamorphic mode for the whole movie. So, but we give people the option. If you want to do it that way, you can do it that way.
This is more of a question really to do with the business and the ethos of the business. I was thinking, have you been ahead of the times or of product development, or is your company simply quickly reactive to significant change?
That's actually an interesting question about, let's take HDR, for example. The Radiance Pro, we started manufacturing in 2015. There was no such thing as HDR video at that time. But we chose FPGA when we first started because field programmable gate arrays are a technology that allows us to adapt with what's changing in the environment. In 2010 or so, 3D video came into play. We had an FPGA. It took us 3 months to get all our 3D working, but we added 3D video to our product and kept on going. And that was pretty much the death knell for all our competitors because they couldn't adapt like we could. So what we did on the Radiance Pro is I actually had bought some smaller FPGAs to do prototyping, but looking at it, I wanted to go to market with only half of the resources of the FPGA in use, so that we had plenty of room to grow. I didn't know what we were going to be adding. We had some thoughts, but we just knew the environment, the video is going to change. We need to be able to adapt. And what we have now is we've had added HDR, we've added instant auto aspect for that, and we've been able to do that. And this 9 years later, and we're still we have room to do, more things. We've used a good chunk of our additional resources, but we're still able to make changes and make improvements. And if you go to our website and look at it, we have releases on a really very regular basis to fix bugs. A lot of times we're fixing bugs in other people's HDMI implementations. We have to work around them, but we fix the bugs. We basically say, here's what it is. Here's what we've improved. Here's what you can do. We've added a lot of control features so people with Crestrons or Control 4 systems can then control their home theaters. We can control the masking. We can auto report the aspect. So we have a lot of those kind of under the hood things that most people don't think about. When they think about a video processor, they think about is it the best image? And our goal is studio reference quality, including filmmaker mode, which is a new thing to counteract the motion interpolation argument that people have. Is like, no, you want to watch it the way the director intended. And in fact, the motion interpolation, the way people are doing, every implementation I know about is done overly simplified. It just isn't the right mathematical way to do it. And even if you did, it's a problem that's really not solvable perfectly, because you're going to have issues of, you have to regenerate the object without any kind of motion blur, and people don't even make an attempt at that. So we do what makes sense for the best studio reference quality in your home cinema.
Talking about studio reference, we know that there's probably quite a few filmmakers and producers and directors who are putting Lumagens into their own home theaters because they just simply weren't satisfied watching their content on anything other than that. Can you give us a bit more information on that?
I can't name names, but we do have a number, like you said, a number of directors and producers using it in their home cinema. I have a producer whose name I can mention, John Thompson, who's become a friend of the company because he's used the Radiance Pro to do his consumer release quality checks for 6 years now, almost 7 years now. He's used it, and as we've developed, he's helped us, basically tells me back things that I know because of the math, that I've made like little choices to keep everything as simple as possible. And he's actually said, hey, this doesn't look right. And I go, okay, I understand why you say that. No one else is seeing that, but we'll make this better. We can go in and we change the math. We make it more precise. We've gone from a complete integer pipeline, for example, to a floating point. And if you're not a math person, you get more precision and more accuracy near black if you have a floating point pipeline. So in the key areas where that matters, we've been able to do that. We've changed from integer to floating point. We've done a lot of algorithm tweaks. We do a lot of processing to try to make our trim pass, our dynamic trim pass, we call dynamic tone mapping, I think I mentioned, but make that as good as if you had a human doing that in non-real time, because that's what they do in the studio. They go through and back and forth in non-real time, they're able to do it. And John says our real time is as good or better, he's actually saying, than what they're doing in the studio, because we've just really worked on it for a number of years, 5 to 6 years now. We've been working on HDR. So dynamic tone mapping is a key feature for us. It's a key improvement for the home cinema, because no matter what, if you got a bright projector, if you got a dim projector, if you got an LED video wall or a big TV, we can do that. In Europe, a lot of people are using the Lumagen with a large television because they don't have room for a projector-based system. But in the US, it's mostly projectors that we're selling into the home cinema market. People have a big screen. I have basically about a 4-meter wide screen here, not quite. And so you have a big screen, you need to make the image quality look good. 4K is really good. I sit one screen width away, and 4K content is already slightly below human visual acuity at 4K at one screen width. So we are trying to take and make that image quality be as perfect as we can make it by better scaling, image enhancements, dynamic tone mapping. Aspect control is a big thing to make sure that it's just dialed in right. You can dial it in. We have all sorts of specifics that have been asked for by dealers over the years. So we tend to be very responsive to requests. Can you do this? Can you do this? Add this feature. Sometimes they're simple features like add this command so I can better use my control system. A lot of times it's images, auto aspect, instant auto aspect, and stuff like that.
Amazing. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the major studios have got a Lumagen or two hiding around in their tech.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that there are, on a fairly regular basis, we talk to people doing it for the best quality in their suites. But also we're finding, we're starting to see people use us in audio suites. So we have a person who does the audio tracks for movies now, just put a Lumagen in because he wanted to be able to do perfect lip sync. And that's something that really only the Lumagen is going to be able to do for you, because we have what's a true genlock feature, which other video processors don't. And you're going to have one or more frames of variance at 24 hertz. That's 43 milliseconds. That's basically visible lip sync issues if you don't have a Lumagen. But in addition, we have the ability to put in a video delay. And so we're seeing this advanced algorithms for audio taking longer and longer. We see DSP speakers taking a long time. So we can delay the video. So it used to be you had to delay the audio because the video got there too soon. And now we're seeing a lot of cases where the video has to be delayed because the audio is taking longer. So those are the kind of features that you don't think about necessarily when you think about a video processor. But if you want the best possible lip sync, you need to have a Lumagen if you're going to do a video processor, because you need to have that sync maintained, and we can adjust it. You can actually have different sources, different providers sometimes have different lip sync. They're not supposed to, but we see that certain content has a different lip sync, and you can adjust that in the Lumagen. And we have multiple memories, so you could have a memory for when you're watching, one source, and then a different memory with a different video delay when you're watching another source. So we have constant time. So we can do exactly, the same within a millisecond or so. Every single frame shows once on the screen, not twice, not zero, because you have other processors will have frame drops or they'll have frame doubling. If you want to be perfect and have that cinema reference quality, genlock, true genlock is a very critical feature to have.
You had a wonderful accolade review from AV Forums based in the UK of the brand new current Lumagen Pro, and I think one of the major features was to do with the improved audio performance, just because of some of the better chips and cleaner power. Do you want to just comment on the latest upgraded version?
Okay, that's the top of our line is the Radiance Pro 5000 series. We have two products. We have a 6-in 2-out and a 10-in 3-out. And the 3 outputs, like a lot of people will have a TV and a projector, or they'll want to drive a TV in another room, and you can do that. It's a single thread, so you watch one at a time. But what we wanted to do, I'm kind of an old 2-channel guy. I used to have Jeff Rowland amps, and I had SACD and Wilson Audio puppy speakers. If you're into that, you probably know what I'm talking about. So I really want the best audio. One of the things that controls when you're having to convert from digital to analog, how good the quality of the audio is jitter at the DAC. Jitter at the DAC is essential. Lowest possible is going to give you less distortion. That's a well-known fact in hi-fi, high fidelity audio circles, that you want to reduce the jitter. So my goal with the 5000 is we don't process audio. We don't touch it. We just send it on through. But what we could do is we could make the jitter going out of the Lumagen much better than the jitter coming into the Lumagen from an audio processor. We've seen some sources, some very popular Blu-ray players have significantly over what they're supposed to have for jitter, some as much as 400 picoseconds. And so what we're able to do is we're able to capture that data accurately. It's digital, we can capture it. And that what we do is we actually recreate the HDMI signal on the output with a crystal clock, so it has ultra low jitter. And we've measured the jitter on the 5000 series at around 10 picoseconds. It varies by a picosecond or two. We had releases that were slightly better than 10s. We've had releases slightly like 11, 12 that we've done. But we actually now, and John Thompson has actually been kind enough that he actually tells us what the jitter for various releases is, so that we can maintain my goal is 10 picoseconds of clock jitter, which then gives a better signal to the audio processor. And they have internal de-jitter circuits, which then they can even make it better. So I was personally, I knew it was going to sound better, but I used the song Never Enough from Greatest Showman. And I had been playing that, and then I put, the first time I had the 5000 prototype, I put that in there, and I just was amazed at how much better just reducing the jitter does. Some people don't believe this, but people who have heard it tell me I undersell the improvement. And so it's one of those things that it is a true fact that lower jitter to the audio processor can improve audio. It's going to vary between your audio processor and the source and stuff like that. So I have like 30 some linear power supplies in this purely digital product. And the reason I did that is I can isolate critical areas for they have their own linear power supply. And so that keeps them separate the multiple ground planes in the circuit board, some places 3 or 4 ground planes, just to keep the impedance in the ground planes, circuit design techniques that really can improve the audio. And that's a big advantage we have over, doing a home theater PC. If you did that, you have the PC's jitter. And our jitter is very consistent, low electrical noise in our output. And that can help too, because even on the projectors, if you look at LCOS, DILA, those are analog technologies under the hood. You want to have the lowest noise. And we have seen just reducing the electrical noise on the HDMI input to the projector can, and I've seen it, other people have seen it, you may or may not see it, but it can make the picture better as well, because you get that low level noise floor down a few extra dB, and the image just kind of pops a little bit better.
I think that'll be music to the ears of audiophiles who've really serious about their home theaters as well. So I think that's extraordinary. Now, in terms of where we're going with video, obviously, I know you've got some views on 8K. We'll touch on that in a moment. But looking at ultra large micro LED displays like Samsung The Wall or CC'd unfolding TV and LG Electronics, they'll also have video processors on board. But I guess one would argue that to get the best out of the biggest displays, you really need to be using the best video processing technology in conjunction with that.
Yes, we actually have an LED OEM manufacturer. They buy stuff, but they buy specific technology. They sell a Radiance Pro with every video wall because they know that's going to give them the best and most consistent high quality viewing experience for their customers. And you can do various aspect ratios. You could have an aspect ratio of 16:9, 170, or you could have 240. Or I'm actually talking to LED Wall. You got a block-based video. Why not do 2.0 or 2.1 or 2.2 to kind of compromise? Because we see a lot of people doing home cinemas, they're really watching movies. So 240 for screens is the most common. But I see more in the LED Wall market, a lot of them are high-end people who want the best, but they have a very mixed, they're watching 16:9 content and they're watching 240 content for movies and various ones in the thing. Netflix and some of the other providers now have movies at 2.0 or 2.1 or 2.2, and the Lumagen supports all those aspect ratios. And if you had a 2.0, 2.1 screen, typically referred to as constant area, you can get the best out of both worlds. And some people will take that and they'll actually use the Lumagen. I want to fill the screen. I mean, I'm willing to crop a little bit on a 2.4 movie. I'm willing to stretch it 16:9 content a little bit. And if you do that, you can actually fill the entire screen. Now, I don't typically do that, but you can fill a little bit more. I've actually done tests on my friends without their knowledge that I would stretch images 10% vertically or horizontally. We'd watch the movie and I'd ask what their response was, and their response was, "It looks amazing." I said, "Well, did it look stretched?" "No, I couldn't see anything." So you can do a little bit of that. It's really, purists wouldn't do that, but a lot of people who want the best home cinema, I just want to sit down, I want to hit play, and I like it when I fill my screen. A 2.0 screen or a 2.1 screen is a great way to basically have the best of both worlds. And maybe for a 2.40 movie, you'll leave a little black on the left and the right, but maybe less than you would, because we can stretch a little bit, you'll never notice. Crop a little bit, you don't have any stretching. So all those kind of features are programmable. The user gets to decide what they want. It's their home theater, it's your choice. If you want to watch instant auto aspect on Top Gun, Maverick, great, you can do that. If you want to stretch the movie to fill your screen, yes, great, you can do that. So we just give the flexibility to let the customer decide what they want.
Now, every decade or so, we're seeing improvements in the number of pixels and resolution. And as you mentioned before, we went from DVD to Blu-ray to now 4K HDR. what in your opinion is the future for 8K?
8K, I'm certainly not opposed. I have an NZ9 from JVC. It's 8K projector. It's still pixel shift, but it's truly, we can see 8K pixels. If you walk up to the screen and stand a foot away, you can see that resolution. You can't see it your seat if you're one screen width away, which kind of is what I talk to people. One screen width is kind of the optimal place. You could be a little closer, a little farther, but 4K is already below your human visual perception. But for the projector, just like you can oversample audio, you can oversample video. And so we can make a little bit better picture with 8K. We send 4K to the projector, they scale to 8K, and then we can do some of our enhancements, like edge enhancements, to dial in that 8K image to look as good as possible. The best images we produced, one of our dealers was here and we were going through that. We send 4K to the NZ9 with a little enhancement from the Lumagen. It looks significantly better than sending direct to the projector at 4K. And so from a display point of view, I'm not opposed to 8K. You're just talking about oversampling though. So at 4K, if you've got 4K, you've already got a really excellent image. Humans, the visual perception is about one arc second, 1/60th of 1 degree of arc. At 1x screen width, 4K is already below that. So you're just talking about maybe a little oversample. So it's a very, very subtle change in the projector. I'm not opposed to it. But if you got a 4K projector, you know you've got a really good looking image. On the other hand, from the content point of view, my mathematical argument is if you're using bits to improve images in a way that you can't see, you've done the wrong thing. So I'm a big advocate of better 4K for content and not 8K for content, because you're not going to really be able to see that unless you're sitting close. Now, if you're in front of a computer screen sitting a foot away, 8K, you probably can see. If you've got a 30, 40 inch screen and you're sitting 20 inches away, you might actually be able to see that if you're gaming or something. But for a home cinema, you're sitting one screen width away. You don't want to sit too much closer. And if you sit farther away, then there's less reason even. But 4K content, mathematically, if you look at the algorithms, if you look at what they call the discrete cosine transfer that they do, they convert from the temporal domain to the frequency domain. And what they do is they start throwing out high frequencies. So you could encode to 8K, since you're already at 4K, you're at your minimum perceived resolution by a human. You're not gaining anything by taking bits to improve that. But if you took 4K and we said, hey, let's go from 420 with more compression, let's do either lossless or near lossless at 4K. So basically my argument is, given the same bandwidth and the same algorithms, you probably won't see a difference between the 4K encode and the 8K encode. And in fact, if you create issues because you're limited in bandwidth, which we all know that's a problem for streaming, you could actually make the 8K look worse because you're going to create artifacts that wouldn't be there if you encoded it at 4K. Now that's all theoretical. I haven't done any real study, but from a mathematical perspective, I don't see, there was definitely a reason to go from standard F to HD, and there's definitely a reason to go from HD to 4K. I don't see mathematically a advantage in 8K content. Other people might disagree, but from that perspective, I don't think there's a reason. Certainly, you've already gone past diminishing returns at 4K, because we have people who've actually done tests. They've taken a 4K movie and they've taken the 2K version of that, and they've shown them through the Lumagen, one at 4K going out with no scaling and one 2K going out with scaling from the Lumagen, and people in their audience could not tell which was which. So already at 4K, even with 2K content, we can scale it so well that it's hard to differentiate between the 2K and the 4K. And so we're already there with 4K. There's no reason, in my opinion, to do 8K content. Now, from a marketing perspective, people may do it. I just don't want to do that for a marketing reason.
It's good. So it's always good to know, look at the maths and see if the maths adds up first, rather than spending the dollars going on the hype. So at least I know I don't need to get rid of my 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray discs just yet.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of future developments, I mean, Lumagen is really there. You're constantly changing things. You're very receptive to your consumers, and you take advice from people who are using it in the field. Are you allowed to disclose anything at the moment in terms of what's on the horizon, or is it still a secret?
We don't talk about future development. I basically, my view of that is that's a good way to put yourself out of business. Until you have something, you don't talk about it. We are looking at things. We're not, we're not standing still. But what I like to tell people is the Radiance Pro has been in production for 9 years, but it is not the video processor from 9 years ago because of the field programmable gate array. We have totally revamped. We've completely redid, even 2 years ago, we completely redid the pipeline. It was almost a ground up, wasn't quite, but it was almost a ground up redesign without having to change, and it was free. So the products we have, we feel comfortable with, will last because it's 4K is what you need. We don't need faster 4K input chips that are 4K. They already do that. We don't need faster 4K output chips. They already do 4K, 18 gigahertz. And so that peripheral of the design doesn't have to change for 4K. But the internals, the mathematics of the algorithms for the scaling, we've done significant improvements in scaling. We've added an edge enhancement. We've added dynamic tone mapping. We've added auto aspect. So that is all stuff that we can do without changing the hardware. We just have to program the FPGA to do different things. And your product is a long-lived product because it's growing and maturing over time.
This is probably a very late question. People may have asked you this before, but we're using these in high-end home theaters, the very best home theaters. If you're really serious about audiovisual performance, this is the sort of product that you add into the chain. What do they do for commercial theater?
Commercial theater is DCI. It's bit per bit, basically. You have it at the resolution you're going to show it. So if you have a 4K screen, 4K projector in your theater, you get DCI content at 4K. Or if it's a 1080 projector, which still, there's a lot of theaters that are still HD, you get DCI content at that resolution. So that is a one-to-one type of environment. What we see, though, is for the producers and directors, a number of which have the Lumagen, and that's been the preferred. John Thompson is actually, he's kind of like an advocate for us. He does demos. He does blind comparisons between us and the competition for these directors and producers, and the Lumagen comes out on top. He says it's really, us and Dolby Vision are right there. We can do it on the fly what Dolby Vision does pre in the studio. And so he says, yeah, they're actually liking the Lumagen result because of the transfer function. We're able to identify exactly what to do for that scene. And so what a big market for us is high-end industry people in the movie industry use the Lumagen for their consumer content. So if you could have a DCI license in your home, which a lot of the producers do, that's great. But they buy a projector that will do DCI content, Digital Cinema Initiative to define that. But they have to have a way to watch the consumer content as best as possible. They want to watch TV on their 4K projector. They want to watch movies that, they may have it on a disc instead of, or they have a Kaleidoscape Strato, like a lot of our customers. I have a Strato. That's my preferred viewing, is off of the Strato. We have a large library, and you get to choose what you want to watch. So they use us for the consumer side.
It's very interesting. In fact, you mentioned Kaleidoscape. I believe there's a news article that I saw on LinkedIn that I think they're doing collaborations now with commercial theaters to allow people to watch back catalog titles using their format. So that's quite interesting. Now, we can see that you're sat in your home theater. Do you want to just tell us what you've got in there? I believe you've got a JVC above you, and tell us what tech specs you've got in your theater for the audience.
Well, this is a custom. We basically built an addition on our home, and I was able to do a custom home theater to my specifications. And so that was really nice. Not everyone gets to do that. So but I knew I'd be changing projectors, not all the time, but on a regular basis. So I designed a metal shelf behind. I can move, you can see the shelf up there, I guess. So that's a JVC RS4100 NZ9, depending on which version they sell you. Excellent projector, great contrast. They spec it at a much higher number, but in my room, which is a wife-approved room, it's kind of dark gray. That was a compromise that we made. And I'm getting 20-some thousand to 1 static contrast, which is very, very important. So we have in here, we have a trim off. It's a altitude 16, very good room correction. I have basically first reflection for audio. I have 4-inch thick, and that's one of the things. I actually was reading a book, and 4 inches, so that we have a 4-inch band of acoustic treatments, thick, various acoustic material like rock wool and stuff in there to take the first reflections away from the speakers. So we've got Rebel speakers for all of the speakers in the room. We are basically a 9.2.6. So we have 6 overhead speakers. And so we can do all that. The turn-off does that. I'm looking at Storm Audio. I might be switching. We'll be looking back and forth. So that's another great option for audio, that they do the room correction. The Storm now has active room correction, which is I'm actually looking forward to auditioning in here. So the audio is top-notch and the video is top-notch. We have a just under 4 meter wide Studio Tech Stewart film screen, Studio Tech 130. It's a G3, it's a late G3, generation 3, 2.40 screen. I watch movies, that's what I do in here. I'll watch a documentary, or sometimes we'll watch TV in here, but I watch movies. I chose 2.4 because most movies are 2.4. I can watch 2.2 movies. If I want to, I can stretch them less than 10% and watch them as 2.4. So there's a lot of things we can do, but 16:9, I just watch with the contrast ratio I'm able to get, as I don't really need masking. I just watch it in a darkened room. It looks really good. And so we have the 2 subs. I had a gentleman named Adam Pels come and do the audio tuning for the room. He spent 2 days tuning all the audio for the turn off manually and automatically. Chris Deering is a great calibrator. He lives not too far away. He's also a dealer for us. He came and did the video calibration for me, and we just have it really dialed in to be the best picture we can possibly get for not an astronomical amount of money. It's not inexpensive, but it's not some of the theaters we have, people are spending millions of dollars just on the room. Wow. So we have a room, it's 19 foot wide, a false front wall that's 23 feet, and then the projector, I don't use an anamorphic lens. We have enough light without that, and I just prefer not having that unless you need more light output. If you do, then great, anamorphic lens is really good. So it's that, and I'm in here. This has become my office. I sit in here all day, and then if someone has a question, I can actually fire up the theater and say, okay, well, let's talk about it. Let me go through, here's my settings for my projector, and we can talk about it. Here's my settings for the Lumagen, and we can talk about it. So it's really nice to have. And in fact, we built this theater, just as we were really getting into dynamic tone mapping about 5 years ago, the theater came online in very early 2019, and I've been able to do a lot of work, and I spend a lot of time evaluating content. A lot of the dynamic tone mapping, we evaluate by eye. Some people, they talk about pixel peeping, which is okay if you're sitting in front of a computer screen a foot away, but that's not the way to evaluate home theater. Home theater content, you evaluate from your seating position, or I'll walk up to the screen sometimes if I want to see something okay, should I go, what can I see close up that I go back to my seat and then see if I can see that. But one of the key messages I have for customers who are thinking about a home cinema, you don't watch movies from a foot away from your screen. It just makes no sense. Pixel peeping is exactly that. You don't want to pixel peep because there's actually things you can see at viewing distance that you can't see a foot away. It's like the drawings. I don't have a good example specifically, but if you look at it close, it looks like one thing. And if you hold it back far away, it looks like something else. Same thing. If you're going to evaluate, you need to evaluate from where you're going to be viewing. If you can't see it from where you're viewing, then it makes no sense to optimize it. We don't optimize for photographs because they have high frequency content that will never occur. If you optimize for photograph, you're not getting the best possible picture for video. And same, you need to have moving pictures. You need to have real content. Much harder to evaluate, no question. People want to go to the simple to evaluate. Look, I can see that. I can see that pixel peeping. I can see that, like, oh, look at that. I can see that pixel on pixel peeping. You can't see it from your viewing distance. It makes no sense. And it was from a photograph. So we have competitors who like to do that, but it makes no sense for the customer. From an engineering point of view, I use pixel peeping, but I use it with the knowledge of how it's going to affect things. Early on, the big test was zone plate, right? How high a resolution can you get your zone plate? And what I found is as I improved the zone plate, I actually could make the image from my viewing distance worse, because you're doing something to make something look better that first of all, doesn't occur in video. You do have some issues. You have to work about array and other issues, but you have to worry about it from where the person is sitting. So our algorithms are all tuned for motion video. We don't tune for photographs. And you still got to, if you want to look at photographs, they still look great through the Lumagen, but we are all about studio reference quality video. And that's why we tune our algorithms the way we tune them.
Technology with purpose, and it's important that you mentioned about thank you for sharing your home theater features with us, and it's good to know that you mentioned about digital room technology and the making improvements there. So I think you mentioned that you've got a Trinov, and obviously with that you get so many channels of processing, and you're thinking about Storm. I'd also recommend that to visit your nearest Steinway Lingdorf dealer and maybe check out Room Perfect as well.
Absolutely, we have a number of clients that use the Lingdorf. So it's basically, I'm not completely neutral on audio, but any good high-end audio. And one of the things we find is the high-end audio products tend to not have the best HDMI, and we can actually often work better with the high-end audio than just going directly from sources. Not always, but HDMI is kind of it's a difficult thing because you've got all these very high frequency microwave kind of signal technology, and people don't really understand how interconnect the cables makes so much difference. In audio quality and bit error rates. And we've seen things where at 4K, the nice thing about it is they hide errors in 4K. Whereas at 1080, when you had a bit error, you saw sparkles on the screen. At 4K, the image is not quite as good. So it's a better way to fail, the softer fail. But one of the key things we talk about is the best interconnect. So just real quickly, I'm recommending 3-meter passive cables. Even if you only need a meter, don't use a meter, because the transmitters for HDMI all have cable pre-equalization, assuming a certain amount of attenuation in the cable. The receivers all have post-equalization, assuming a certain amount of equalization in the cable. No one says what that is. No one says how long does it need to be. I don't see why 1-meter cables, or even 1-foot cables especially, are even sold. They're just not the optimal length. Optimal length in our testing, this is thousands of phone calls, is a 3-meter length. Sometimes 2 works great. Less than 2, people tend to have some issues over time, or they just don't get the quality that they want. And if you go past about 4 meters for a passive. So what I tell people is, for passive connection, a 48 gigahertz passive cable is what you should use at a 3-meter length. I call it the Goldilocks solution. It's the porridge of HDMI is just right at 3 meters. Can be fine at 2, can be fine at 4. 3 meters. If you have to make a choice in the blind, I don't know what cable length is going to be optimal, choose 3-meter passives. 48 gigahertz. I'm actually becoming to the point where I'm not specifically recommending a particular brand anymore at 48 gigahertz. If you can get 48 gigahertz cables, then they're certainly going to work well at 18. We have a lot of brands who the 18 gigahertz cables that they had certified don't work well at 18 because they probably didn't quite, do everything the same way on every single cable. But at 48 gigahertz, you've got enough headroom that I'm just saying, buy whatever brand you want of 48 gigahertz. Better cables are, good cable mechanically, so they'll last longer. One of the almost opposite from that is active fiber cable. I tell people, if you've got a 4K projector, or even if you only have 4K sources, you buy a 18 gigahertz active cable instead of a 48, because that's a physics issue that buffers in the 48 gigahertz cables have to be faster. They're going to have faster edge rates than the 18 gigahertz equivalent. And we see, literally, I have people who have problems with the 48 gigahertz active cable. I get them to buy the same brand, whatever brand it is, buy the 18 gigahertz version. And they put that in and all the problems go away. So it's a tune physics problem. So you tune your system to match your what you need. 4K content needs 18 gigahertz for active cables, but because of the design, the transmission line losses, the discontinuities in the impedance, the 48 gigahertz cables are just better cables for you to use at 3 meters. The 18s are, if it's a true 18, then at 18 gigahertz, that's perfectly fine. But I just tell people, buy a 48 gigahertz cable, they're common. Just don't buy the active cables at 48 gigahertz, buy those at 18.
So there's some very, very useful knowledge there for enthusiasts for high-end systems and even not so high-end systems, but if you just don't want things to fail. Now, we're in the business of enjoying movies and you're in your home theater, so I've got to ask you, what are your favorite movie titles and TV shows? And you can mention things that look fantastic to show exactly what the Lumagen does, or just simply favorites from years gone by.
Okay, good. Well, I like fantasy. My favorite movie is Lord of the Rings. When I grew up, I read the Lord of the Rings multiple times when I was in high school. And so our theater theme, I don't know if you can see it, but you can kind of see there's 2 banners my wife had custom done, but we have all sorts of Lord of the Ring statues and swords and knives and stuff outside. That was my wife's thing. She wanted to make the theme of the theater right. So Lord of the Rings is probably my favorite movie of all time, but I like the Avengers. I like action movies. Murder on the Orient Express is one I like for the quality of the imagery, especially the long distance shot. They've done great. There's a number of movies that have really good cinematography like that. So I kind of like those kind of movies, action movies. I like war movies, stuff like that. So fairly typical movie.
Fantastic. Well, I think thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure catching up with you, and just to let the audience know that you're very, very receptive to comments and feedback, and people can get in touch with you pretty easily. So I'll put all the information in the comment section, and we look forward to seeing where Lumagen goes, seeing how the company progresses. And thank you for making our viewing pleasure so much more astonishing and just allowing us to have more fun.
Well, thank you for having me. One little closing comment is we are all about support. We're a small company, so when you call support, you're typically going to talk to me and not my engineer, but I want to be the best support in the industry. I think we've earned that reputation. Call Jim 10 o'clock on a Friday night and he'll answer the phone if he's available. So we want people to have not only the best image quality on their screens, but we want them to have the best overall experience. We work through issues with people. Most of the issues we solve by changing cables, as we were talking about. But I do want to thank you for having me. It's always fun to chat about video. It's kind of my hobby. That's how I actually got started, as I was saying early on. It's my hobby, so it's good. Making the video better makes me enjoy my hobby more.
Fabulous. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll catch up another time.
Okay, thank you very much for the time.